There were many retro game magazines back in the 80s and 90s. Atari Age, GamePro, Electronics Gaming Monthly, TurboPlay, and many more. The main one you always hear about is Nintendo Power. And rightfully so. A lot of love and care went into that magazine, and it showed. It was an informative and fun publication that was extra important because the internet wasn't a mainstream thing yet. But what about Nintendo's competitor, Sega? Well, Sega certainly did take a shot at creating their own magazine, and we're going to talk about it today. Let's talk about Sega Visions. But first, let's take a look at Sega's first publication, the Team Sega newsletter. This was first called the Sega Challenge, the Team Sega newsletter, and this had a 7-issue run between 1988 and 1989. It was basically promotional material that was sent out to people who owned a Sega Master System. But it also had some neat little sections like reader-submitted high scores and a Ask the Sega Master section. The last issue of the newsletter was released in December of 1989. 6 months later, however, it was revamped into the Sega Visions magazine to coincide with the release of the Sega Genesis in the United States. Launching in 1990, Sega Visions was Sega's answer to Nintendo Power. Well, kind of. One of the biggest differences was the Sega Visions was not sold in stores, as it was sent out for free to owners of the Master System or Genesis. If a Sega customer sent in a registration card for the console they purchased, they apparently would automatically receive a few free issues of the magazine and then be asked to subscribe if they'd like to keep getting it in the mail. The magazine didn't really have a set release schedule. It was sometimes bi-monthly and sometimes it was quarterly. This is interesting since in the premiere issue's welcome letter from the publishers, it straight up says that it was intended to be a bi-monthly magazine. But when researching this, it seems that Sega maybe never actually intended for this to be a serious publication, unlike Nintendo Power. This makes more sense to me since this magazine was free for Sega customers. But what makes this even more confusing is that there's a price tag on each issue, at least on the issues I have. Why have a price listed if it's always intended to be free? I don't get it. Were these actually sold somewhere? They don't seem to have been. At least, it's confusing to people like myself who weren't even aware of this magazine during its duration because I was a young kid. And a Super Nintendo kid at that. Anyway, I feel the magazine was pretty nice for it being free. Yeah, there were obviously a lot of advertisements for Sega games and even for the Sega Channel, but there were some interesting features as well. There were short and simple game reviews, previews of upcoming games, letters from readers, and interesting write-ups on things like what it's like to spend a day at Sega headquarters. I especially enjoyed the articles on what Sega was doing to keep things fresh in the arcades, and the article about their involvement in the theme park industry. That's something I'd like to look more into, actually. Now, I don't own all the issues, but from my small Sega Visions collection, it's clear that some issues are a lot better than others. Some are very bare bones, and basically just advertisements, like the Toe Jam and Earl one from fall 1991. While others feature a lot of reviews, letters from readers, and interesting articles. It had potential. Much like Nintendo Power's Howard and Nestor comics, Sega Visions had their own comic character called Niles Nemo. He looked like a stereotypical 90s cool kid, sunglasses and all. He's totally rad. There are various theories as to why the magazine ended up failing, as people say it was purely a marketing tool since the writers weren't allowed to badmouth Sega at all, meaning they most likely didn't give honest, legitimate reviews. Also, they didn't stick to the plan of the magazine being bi-monthly, so this could have turned off readers who were looking forward to the next issue coming in a timely manner. Sega didn't really seem to care all that much about the magazine, which is a shame. I say that because apparently other publications received information to print way before the official Sega magazine got wind of it. Which, is kind of a bad look. I mean, shouldn't the official Sega magazine have at least a few exclusive first looks? All of this is frustrating to learn about because this really could have been a legit Sega version of Nintendo Power, which I think was something Sega fans would have been eager to have in their lives. Sure, there were other publications, but an official Sega magazine that could have had quality articles, reviews, exclusives, and be able to be sold at bookstores would have probably made it a success. But all that being said, I think it did have some charm and I really liked the layout. I especially like the attention to fonts and design styles in some of the issues. If you see it for what it was, a free, comfy little Sega newsletter packaged as a magazine, then it was a pretty sweet little deal. Obviously, if you wanted legit reviews of Sega games, you'd be reading Electronic Gaming Monthly or another magazine at the time. But for what it was, I like it. I think what they did within their limitations was pretty impressive. Sega Visions had 25 issues and ran from 1990 to 1995. In September of 1995, the last issue was published, but there was no indication that it was going to be the final issue. It just kind of faded away with no goodbye, which is kind of sad. There was even a preview of an alleged next issue. The funny thing is, this issue was pretty good in my opinion. So what do you guys think caused the final downfall of the magazine? And if you were a subscriber, what was that like? Please feel free to share any personal stories in the comments about this because I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, thank you so much for watching and I'll be back again very soon. Bye!